Hello everyone, and welcome to the RV Inspection and Care channel. I'm Dwayne and I'm a certified RV inspector. And today we're going to be talking about RV weight ratings, what they are, what they mean, and how you can use them to operate your RV safely on the highway. Now, I know that there's some folks that just go and buy RVs, and when they do, they buy it, they put everything they've got into it that they think they're going to use while they're camping, and boom, off they go to enjoy those RVing adventures. And you know, if you do that, the problem is that you're not giving consideration to the RV weight ratings. And without knowing that information, you could very well be putting yourself, your loved ones, your passengers at serious risk. And nobody wants to do that. So we're going to talk today about RV weight ratings and help explain them so that you can make sure that you're RVing safely. You know, the more that you're around RVs over the long haul, the more you kind of come to realize that with RVs, everything sooner or later comes back to weight. It's so true. It simply means that the bigger your RV is, the wider it is, the more luxuries and amenities that you're carrying along, well, then the bigger engine you have to move that weight down the road. But it doesn't stop there. You have to have a bigger transmission. You have to have beefier suspension. You have to have bigger brakes. So you see where I'm going with this. You know, some folks assume that if the engine can move it all down the road, well, then it's fine. But that's not the case. With too much weight, your transmission could easily break. With too much weight, you might be going down the road well, but you can't stop that RV in a safe distance. Maybe the suspension breaks down. It could affect your tires because too much weight on the tires will cause them to run hot, and they could even blow out. So you can see where I'm going with this. Weight is very important when it comes to RVs, and that's why RV manufacturers do their best to help us out with that. They publish a list of weight ratings for each RV, and there's a spot somewhere on every RV that tells you what the RV weight ratings are for that particular RV. And as long as you stay within those weight ratings, you're fine. You're operating the RV the way it was designed and in a safe manner at that point. Now, some folks kind of get scared about these weight ratings, but the truth is, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know much about weight ratings. There's really only a few that you need to know about really to be able to operate safely. And what we're going to do in this video is identify those weight ratings, explain them so we understand them, and then that way we can use them correctly as we go down the road with our RV and enjoy our RV travels. So let's get started first of all in explaining what the weight ratings are for RVs and what they mean. Okay, so let's identify our weight ratings. And the first one we want to talk about is GVWR right here. And as you can see below it, it stands for Gross Vehicle Weight Rating. Now, what does that mean? Well, here's the sort of everyday definition right here. It's the most that a vehicle can safely weigh while traveling down the road. So what does that mean? Well, it means it includes the total weight of any vehicle that's on the road, including the drivers, the passengers, the cargo, fuel, any accessories that you've added to that vehicle that you might have put on, like running boards or whatever. Everything that that vehicle weighs cannot exceed the gross vehicle weight rating. That's the maximum that you can use safely and propel down the highway with that vehicle. All right, now let's go to the second weight rating, and that is GAWR. And as you can see, it stands for Gross Axle Weight Rating. And the everyday definition is it's the most weight that any one axle can support while traveling down the road. Now, why is that important? Well, you may have your total weight under the GVWR, but that weight may be distributed in an uneven way. So one axle has way too much weight on it, and it can't support that weight. So using these two weight ratings together helps us understand whether the weight is not only under the limit, but whether it's distributed and proportioned correctly. So now, using these two weight ratings, let's actually see it at work on a vehicle. Now, to illustrate how these weight ratings actually work, we're going to use the example of our little towed vehicle, our little 2011 CRV. And if you open the driver's door and you look inside on the pillar, you're going to see this label right there. And this is very common. Almost all cars, you're going to see this kind of label somewhere around the front door. And when you look at the label right on the top, there you go. You have the GVWR, you have GAWR for the front axle, you have GAWR for the rear axle. And then they tell you what the weight rating is. Now, first of all, they list it in kilograms, but of course we use pounds. So the GVWR for my little CRV is 4,560 pounds. That's the most that it should weigh going down the road. The front axle at most should have 2,310 pounds on it. The rear axle, 2,290 pounds on it. Now, let's see that in action on the car itself here. And here's a side picture of my little CRV. And as you can see right here, everything that vehicle weighs as it travels down the road is the GVWR should not be more than 4,580. But then we break it out to the front axle and the rear axle. And the rear axle should never have more than 2,290 pounds. The front axle never more than 2,310 pounds. Now, if I am within the GVWR and each axle rating as well, then I am operating this vehicle the way that it was designed by the manufacturer and in a safe manner as I'm going down the road. So that's how these weight ratings actually work. Now, the important point to understand here is, of course, we're talking about RVs. Well, this principle applies to all vehicles going down the road. So if you have a motorhome, then the motorhome has to conform to the same guidelines. It has a GVWR, a total weight limit. It has limits on each axle. You need to find both of those weight ratings and work with them to make sure that you're operating them safely. All right, so that's how weight ratings work. Well, that's a close look at GVWR and GAWR and what they mean and how we can use those weight ratings. And you know, if you have a motorhome that doesn't tow a vehicle behind it, well then they may be the only weight ratings that you really need to know about. You know, for instance, if you have a Class B motorhome or a small Class C, well, they're small enough that a lot of RVers just use them not only for the RV, but also for their around town vehicle. And it could be fine for that. So there's no need for a towed vehicle at that point. So really the only weight ratings that you need to focus on in that case are the weight ratings for the motorhome itself. Now, how do you find out, though, how much that motorhome or your RV weighs? Well, that's actually a fairly simple process. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you take your RV and put everything in it that you're going to use going down the highway. For instance, you need to make sure you have the passengers in it that you're going to be taking with you. You need to have a full tank of fuel, your full tank of propane if you have that. Whatever fresh water or wastewater that you feel you'll normally have traveling down the road, then make sure you've got that in there. All the cargo that you're going to be taking with you. In other words, what normally would be with you as you're going down the highway. And so once you have the RV outfitted that way, now you need to take it to a scale and have that RV weighed so you know whether you're within the weight ratings of that RV or not. Now, I personally like to use CAT scales to do that. CAT Scale is a company that produces these scales for truckers mainly. Truckers really have to know what's going on with their weight. They're checked very often to make sure they're not overweight. So CAT Scale places these scales all across the country, and really there's a lot of them. It's kind of rare if you don't have one within driving distance. And so you can use their scales to weigh your RV and get the information you need for your RV weight ratings. But now, how do you find a CAT scale? Well, the good news is the company has a website that you can use to do that, and it's called catscale.com. So here is how you can use their website to find a scale that's close to you. So here we are on catscale.com, and all you need to do to find one that's near you is go up here to the top in the menu, and there you are, CAT Scale Locator. Let's press that, and here we come up with this page. And as you go down the page, first of all, there's a section right there where you can just decide to enter in where you're located, and it'll pull up however many locations that you want, doing it that way. Or you could also go a little farther down the page, and there you go, you've got a map of all the CAT scales in the country, and you can zoom in any way you want and find where the CAT scales are that are close to you. By using their website, you should be able to find something that's usable around the area where you are. So that's how you can use catscale.com to find a scale that's close to you. Now, you'll find that many of these scales are at large truck centers, places like Love's and TA's and Petro's and Flying J's and all of this. And the first time you pull in there, you might feel kind of intimidated. You're there with the big rigs all around you, and it is intimidating. You may even question whether you even belong back there at that scale with them. Let me assure you, you do belong. The truth is, they will weigh anything as long as they get paid for it. So here's what I normally do. Before I get on the scale, I'll usually go into the counter and tell the person there that I have an RV and that I'll be weighing it, so they understand what I'm doing. And then I get in line for the scale, or sometimes you can just pull right on it. And once you're there, very often you'll find that you can communicate with the counter inside through a speaker. And they'll tell you when they're about to weigh, what they're doing. And then when they're done, they'll tell you they're done, so you can pull off. Just go find an area to park, go inside, get your report, your list of weights. And then you can compare that with the weight ratings. They'll tell you what your total weight is, what the weight is on each axle, and so on. And then you have a complete understanding of what's going down the road with you in your RV. Now, let's suppose that you get your information from the scale and you find out that, oh no, you're overweight. Your GVWR rating is what you've exceeded. You've actually got more weight than you should in the RV in general. What do? Well, there's only one thing to do. You've got to find ways to economize on the weight. Usually that's in your cargo. So you might just need to start pulling out some cargo. Some things that you really wanted to take with you, you might want to keep them, but maybe there's some things that you could do without, and you need to start moving those out of the RV. Get that weight down under the GVWR for sure. Now suppose though you find out that, well, you're under the weight rating for the gross vehicle weight, but you're overweight on an axle. One of the axles has too much weight on it. Well, that's another matter, and that means you need to reposition some of the weight. Maybe the way that you pack your cargo in needs to be rethought out and repositioned so that that axle doesn't have too much weight on it. And you can position it so that you distribute it a little bit more evenly. And so you would never know that if you hadn't gone through that scale and gotten the information. But once you do, you can make the adjustments needed to make sure that you're going down the highway safely. But now, suppose you do tow another vehicle. Suppose you have a motorhome that has a little towed vehicle behind it. Or suppose you have a travel trailer or a fifth wheel and you have a tow vehicle that pulls it. Now what do you do with the weight ratings? Because you've got two vehicles involved. Well, actually, that is a big subject all to itself, and I'm not going to include that in today's discussion because it would make this video really too long. But the next video is going to talk about that subject. How to use the weight ratings that you're given for your RV and whatever other vehicle is involved, and be able to know that you can tow safely using those weight ratings. Now, to do that, I'll give you a little hint. We've got to add another weight rating. We've talked about GVWR and GAWR. Well, we're going to add one called GCWR. And that means gross combined weight rating. But we're also going to add another weight rating that a lot of folks kind of forget about in this whole process. And therefore, they're not actually driving safely when you don't add in this weight rating along with what we've talked about. So that'll be in the next video. Don't miss it, because if you plan on towing anything during your RV travels, well, you definitely want to see that video as well. Well, I hope what we've covered today has been helpful, and that's it for now. Have safe and happy travels, my friends. Until next time.